Welcome to my video, What is Psychological Projection and How It Can Hurt You in Your Coaching Business. First, I'm going to address what psychological projection is and how we run into it as coaches. Then I'm going to get into where it comes from. I'll share some examples to illustrate it for you, and then talk a little bit about how it can hurt us and even a couple of ideas about what to do about it. Let's go. As coaches, it's not uncommon for us to trigger our own clients. The truth is, we're pushing people to grow. We want them to stretch themselves and expand. And when they do that, and when they do what they hired us for, a lot of times we bump into their edges of their comfort zone. We can run into their limiting beliefs. We can run into their self-defeating patterns. We can run into their stories, their strategies that they've formed, all sorts of things that have kind of, I'm going to say, congealed from past experience. And a lot of times as coaches, when we're working with people, especially high-performing people, right? They've got a lot of baggage. And underneath that baggage is often trauma. And wherever there's trauma that has not been fully processed or metabolized, we can run into a place where people are not willing to go, and a place where they might shut down. And one of the ways that shutdown shows up is projection. So what does projection even look like? Let's talk about what it is and what it looks like. What it looks like, some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing if someone is projecting onto you, is they might be accusing you, they might be blaming you, they might be shaming you, complaining about you, gossiping about you. Essentially, when you find that when you feel that someone is very unfairly targeting you and blaming you for something that you believe really is their thing, that can be a case of projection. So projection, let's define it, okay? It's when someone ascribes to you certain beliefs, motives, ways of being based on your behavior that aren't really true. So for example, this is a pretty obvious example. Let's say you've got a person who was cheated on many, many times in past relationships, and now you're in a relationship with them and they think you're cheating. But you're not cheating, but they are absolutely certain that you are. And they are certain that you are because they've had this experience in the past and they don't trust, right? They can't trust because every time they've trusted, it's turned out that the person was cheating. Okay, so that's one example. Another example could be, similarly, you're in a relationship with a cheater and that cheater is accusing you of cheating. You know, that's a projection as well. It also can be kind of a tactic or a manipulation as well. But often it's just a projection that if somebody is a cheater or has cheated in the past, they might see cheating everywhere because they believe that if they're doing it, right, then they're ascribing that same pattern to you. And so essentially, if you look at it, they're creating a story about you based on either their own past experiences or their own current experiences, based on their own issue, their own wound, their own trigger, their own trauma, whatever it is. Now, here's an important thing about projection. It can be negative, which we're more often familiar with and hurts more, and it can also be positive. So negative projection, we already kind of talked about that. Let's talk about what a positive projection might be. Someone might, if you're a coach or like I am, someone might come into your program thinking that you are the savior, thinking that you are the hero, right? Because in the past, perhaps there was a person that saved them or supported them when they were much younger. By the way, a lot of projection comes from childhood, which I think we'll talk about in a moment. So essentially, somebody might project onto you positive qualities that you don't actually have because they've had those qualities in the past, or they have those qualities, right? So if you've got someone that's super kind and loving and generous, they might ascribe to you kind, loving generosity that you're not really feeling, right? That's a little less common, and we don't notice it as much because, like I said, it doesn't hurt very much when somebody thinks we're better than we really are. And what I will say, though, is either way can be unhealthy. Either way is unhealthy because, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, it's not reality. It's not truth. It's basically having a muddled lens on the world, having a foggy lens, right? That person is not seeing the world as it really is. And the truth is, none of us really see the world as it really is, not most of the time anyway. So where it comes from is often, as I mentioned earlier, some sort of old story, some sort of old trauma, some sort of old experience. And while we can point to, for example, I did have a boyfriend. I had several boyfriends that cheated on me in my teenage years, in my 20s, and my 30s. But the first betrayal, if I really think back, was when I had a crush on a boy in like the second grade, and then I found out that he liked another girl. And that, perhaps that was the root, that was the seed of the betrayal, because most of the time, the initial trauma that creates these wounds and these triggers happens at a very young age, between about 0 and 7 or 8 years old. But we're not going to dive into that in this video. That's beyond the scope of this video. Let's get back to projection in this moment, what it is, and how you can address it. So let's give an example of how this might show up in a coaching business, right? Because I talked about cheating, but this is not what this video is about. You guys are all speakers, authors, coaches, consultants, people who are changing the world. What does it look like when a client projects onto you? Well, luckily, I've had this experience numerous times. So let's use a fictitious example. Let's say, so you have a coaching program, right? And you're enrolling somebody into that program. And let's say that your initial sales call goes really well, and they might even be projecting onto you some very positive attributes, like hero stuff, where you're going to save them, you're going to help them. And it feels great because they're so eager to give you their money, and you sign them up. Fabulous. Let's say you start working with them, and you start to uncover some of these patterns. You start to uncover, oh, wow, this person is blaming everyone outside of them for the stuff that they're facing. And let's say you start to bring their attention to it. And what could happen, right, is that they might project onto you that you are not helping them. You're not saving them. You are blaming them for things that are not their fault. So they might start showing up to the calls resentful, saying, hey, you don't listen to me, you don't get me, you're misunderstanding me, you're telling me this is all my fault. They might say things like, you don't believe me, right? So this person is basically not facing what you're helping them to see, and instead they're putting it back on you. Now you're the bad guy. And that's, I've talked a lot about the victim, hero, villain triad, the drama triangle, and I have videos about the drama triangle. And if you're interested in this, I highly recommend checking out my drama triangle videos, and I'll put a link to that below. But it's very similar. It's a similar dynamic where somebody might say, like, you don't listen, you don't believe me, you're doing this to me, because basically they're not willing to look into themselves. So that is the fundamental issue with projection. And that is really the hardest thing to break through. And I'm going to share with you at the end of this video my favorite solution, the thing that I found that works the best to deal with projection. But essentially what's happening is that they are not willing to take their power. They're not willing to be empowered and to say, wow, okay, the situation that I don't like, I'm going to take responsibility for it, even if I'm, and here's like a really important distinction. And I know I'm meandering a little bit on this topic, but there's a lot here. But essentially, the key to projection is someone's unwillingness to look inside and their only willingness to look outside. So it's very hard to make that shift with people. That is probably, I would say, the number one biggest breakthrough in coaching, is when somebody makes that shift in life, as when they finally get into that place where they take responsibility for everything. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's just a much more empowering way to approach life. Like, I know that you can say, okay, yeah, the traffic slowed me down and stopped me. It was bad traffic, projection, right? Everybody's an idiot. No one knows how to drive in this city, blah, 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 projection of a belief, right? Or there's, man, I should have left 15 minutes earlier. Next time I'm going to leave 15 minutes earlier. That just pulls the ball back right into your court. And many people are simply not willing to operate that way. So here's the solution. Only enroll people once you've made the agreement that that's the way you operate. And that's what you require in order for somebody to join your program. Now, that doesn't mean the person has to be already aware and available for that, like that they're already in that state, but only that they agree that that's the journey that they're willing to go on, or at least that that's part of the journey that they're willing to go on. And that's what I suggest doing is basically early on in the coaching relationship. That's what I do during these videos. That's part of what I do in my enrollment conversation is having someone take full responsibility. Are you going to show up 100%? Are you open to coaching? Are you open to hearing uncomfortable truths? Do you trust me? That's another big important thing, because one of the things that comes up with projection is any place where they've been betrayed in the past, especially if, like, for example, me, I'm a woman, I'm enrolling a woman. If they've been betrayed by a mother figure or a sister or some big woman figure in their life, they might project that onto me as I can't trust her. So I need to look into that, right? And so I recommend the earlier you can start having this conversation, the earlier you can start bringing awareness to where they're projecting, the moment might come that they try to do it with you, and you can say, hey, maybe this is another situation like the one we dealt with before with so-and-so or with that. So my advice to you is to pay attention to it early, bring awareness to the concept of projection early on in your coaching program, make it a cornerstone of the work that you do with people so that when it eventually comes around to you, and it will, they're ready for it, they're aware of it, and there's enough trust built that you can get over it and that they might be willing to take responsibility and say, oh yeah, maybe I am projecting. I hope this was interesting for you. I hope you got value out of it and it helps you in your coaching relationships. If you're looking to do more to develop yourself as a great, prosperous coach, let's connect. You can find out more about my programs at superstaractivator.com. Thanks.